this is being escalated further to the point where the empire is just so outstretched, and now it can't really go anywhere else with this except for maybe the most, the next escalation is perhaps the most dangerous. What do you feel like, I guess, is the what's the end game here for not just this war, but for the entire peace movement? What do you think people need to know about what is at the root of all of this? Because it feels like this is a historic trend, and you've been speaking out against all of these wars for so long. Now that there is this McCarthyism intensifying and the conflicts are getting bigger in terms of their scale and consequence, what do you feel like people need to know about the roots of this? And what do you tell your constituents about the roots of these wars?
Yeah, I mean, look at that's obviously we need a couple of hours to deal with that. But I mean, you're totally right. Like, we're kind of at an historic juncture here now where, I mean, I've been an anti-war activist all my life, and despite what they claim that we're just Putin puppets or whatever, we are totally opposed to this war. The difference is, unlike all the newfound anti-war campaigners who are supposedly against this war, they were never against all the other US wars, or the Saudi wars in Yemen, or Israel's wars in Palestine, or whatever. We're against all war. And I think what you see and what you've described is the gap between the haves and the have-nots is now bigger than at any time before. So if you even look at the living standards of ordinary people in the US, the gulf between those at the top with the money and the ordinary people, and that ordinary people could be people in nice kind of even middle-class jobs, the gulf is absolutely astronomical. And it's that tiny, tiny elite. They used to call it the 1%. It's probably about 0.1% at this stage, are calling the shots. You cannot be president of the US unless you're funded by these lads. And once you're funded by them, they own you, and you will dance to their tune. But it's so patently against the interests even of the people who get elected, family and sort of mildly middle-class, doing okay types, not just ordinary people. So that gulf is global. So where's this going to end? Well, actually, for me, my hope in the future really comes from the global south, and what I see emerging. And we see it at the UN, even like 77 countries called for peace. And it wasn't that like they hate Ukraine or anything and say, oh, it's good enough for them. But they weren't going to buy the lie that the Russian war was the first war in history. They didn't condone it, but they were saying, well, we have to have diplomacy and peace to resolve it. And you look at these countries where the likes of Africa and so on, where you have an educated and a young population who are totally engaged. Like, we get huge feedback from Africa. And the people there understand that it's not just the Russians and the Chinese who are down there, and they bloody well are, to support their own, and the US and the EU. And our attitude is all of ye get out, leave Africa to the Africans and so on, and let them develop it. And I think that anti-colonial mood exists kind of everywhere. And that, to me, is why it's really tragic that Ireland didn't play the role that it could have in this war. I mean, Ireland traded its neutral status, its peacekeeping history, in order to get a seat on the UN Security Council. We're a tiny country on the outskirts of Europe, but we're obviously very pro-West, which are, half of America is Irish. So we're very well in there, but we were a colonized country, so we get it. And we have capital with the global south. We could have played a really good role in arguing for peace, but instead we argued to escalate the war. So for me, the future comes from the global south, from all of those countries which contain a majority of the world's population who reject war, who reject empire, but we don't hear their voices enough in the sort of global north, because the only opinions we care about is, the US, Australia, Canada, Europe, the nice, white, respectable Europeans or whatever. But actually, it's the rest of the world which is the future. They've the most at stake in changing people. And the dialogue that we have with people from those countries shows me that's definitely where the future is. And I think a lot of people in the global north kind of affiliate with that idea as well, about social justice and that, and should take great hope out of that, because I think they can kind of teach us. I think the anti-war movement in Europe and North America and so on has taken a bit of a battering since the Iraq war, when we didn't succeed in stopping that war. But the sentiment is still there, but just people can't really find a way of expressing it. But economic circumstances are going to force them to do that. And as you say, the instability of all of these invasions come back to bite us. So it's not actually even in the interests of US empire. You know, the CEO of some stupid arms company might find out that it's his grandchildren who are going to be the victims of this because the planet is going to be annihilated. So, but that's just the rotten, destructive force of capitalism, really. And it's dying days, but that's when it can kind of cause the most damage. But it's an indication of its weakness, not of its strength.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And you even have mainstream economists saying that the next recession to hit the world is going to be far different, longer, and much more difficult to come out of, because all the things you mentioned, just how these wars are creating, just contradictions that can't really be worked through unless a course is reversed, unless the sanctions have got to end against Russia, if there's going to be any kind of reversal in that relationship, especially around energy. You can't decouple with China and expect the world economy to be stable, especially for the West. Any final thoughts, Claire? I know you got to leave in a couple minutes. Before I let you go, and everyone stick around, I'll be around for quite a bit longer, but I just want to give you any final thoughts before
look, it's been a long week here, and there's so many thoughts. We could be here for a long time, but I do think that, dark and all as things are, there is a lot of light out there as well, and we're generally very optimistic about change, difficult and all as it is, because people have to find a way, and they will find a way. And it would be completely wrong for me to try and outline what that course is. I don't know, but I'm very confident that people will find a way, because they always have in previous societies which were rotten and dying and holding back progress. People found a way to change them, and this juncture will be the same as well. And I think it's great that we do have, the world is most definitely a really smaller place than it was before. So now conversations that we're having now will be viewed in Africa, in China, in Syria, etc. And that means, for young people and ordinary people, we have a space to dialogue and exchange views. And out of that, I suppose education and chatting and critical analysis and critical debate between each other, we will find a way forward out of it. So I think that's a good message to take from it, and that people in that sense should be quite hopeful that we can succeed in changing things, even though it doesn't look great at the moment.